Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Elliot Hasoon. Elliot, welcome.
Thomas, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Very much my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Elliot Hasoon. I am primarily an online health and fitness coach. I'm also a podcaster with a health and fitness and wellness podcast as well. But we go into all different types of territory on that podcast as well. Cover everything because for me, everything falls in the bracket of health. So you can kind of link it back in a way. So I love to have different conversations about different topics, but that's primarily what I do. I'm a health and fitness coach and I'm a podcaster.
Thank you for the introduction. Would you mind starting with your story and why you got into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the fitness thing came from a personal journey when I was much, much younger. I was not in shape whatsoever. I was not a genetically gifted child, unfortunately. And what I found was that I didn't have similar bodies to other guys in the PE changing rooms. And for that, I got made fun of a little bit. It wasn't any intense bullying by any means. I always like to make that point very, very clear. However, it was enough name calling for me to notice that I wasn't really super comfortable in my skin. I was a pretty young boy. I was an active child as well. So that was the confusing part for me. It was like, okay, well, I play football. I do just as much activity as these kids. So why do I not look the same as them? And why am I uncomfortable in my skin and they look fairly comfortable in them? So I always give credit to this very, very young version of Elliot who decided, well, you need to do something about this. Like, what's the answer here? So I go on Google. It's early days of searching fitness online, that's for sure. But I have these little idols in the sense of Zac Efron, who was big on High School Musical at the time, and David Beckham. It wasn't anything like Arnold Schwarzenegger or anyone particularly impressive from a physique standpoint. That was good enough for me, just to have like a flat stomach and maybe a little bit of tone to my muscles. So I started searching Zac Efron diet and training regime, David Beckham diet and training regime, and I find everything I find links towards a high protein and low carb diet. So I was like, perfect, how can I mimic that the best way that I can as a 14-year-old child? So I go to my freezer, I start looking at the nutrition labels, and I'm like, okay, perfect, this has protein in. So I make this little selection and concoction of whatever my parents have in their freezer, and that becomes my new staple dinner. And then I start looking into the gym side of things, and I don't have a gym membership at the time because I'm a kid, and I'm just going to school, playing sports, and doing stuff like that. But then I see some body weight workouts. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to do some press ups. I tell the story about how I do tricep dips on the side of my bath, and I'm doing bicep curls with shampoo bottles as well. And I'm starting to see, very, very minimal changes, but some changes as well. And that evolves into me getting my first weight set, going to the gym, people starting to notice in my school as well. And for me, most importantly, I started to notice as well. And it kind of gave me this new wave of confidence and something that I could say, well, this is something I'm actually quite good at. I took an interest into it. I got very, very passionate about it. And then that eventually led me into it being a career. That's quite a fast forward into the end of the story, but it evolved year on year on year. And I noticed the impact that health and fitness had on my life personally. And I know how many people struggle to get that side of their life in check. So for me, I was like, okay, I've worked this out for myself. There can't be anything better than helping other people work out that formula for themselves as well. And that was the path I pretty much traveled down.
Well, thank you for that. I don't know why this comes to me, but it's something that I will try and communicate, which is there are many kids who have been in your position, meaning they've experienced the same thing, but
Mm-hmm.
you decided to do something about it quite significantly. The question is around why did you, what's in you that's different from the people perhaps that didn't do anything about it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I would love to say that I was this super wise and, sophisticated way of thinking. Yeah, it was a sophisticated way of thinking, but it really wasn't. It was just a sense of, okay, I have a situation here that I'm not very happy with. And fortunately, my mind led me to, I need to find a solution for this. And maybe it was something along the lines of growing up and recognizing that if I wanted to achieve something in my life, it was kind of my responsibility. Maybe it was the things that people said in school. It's like, well, if you want to have good results in your classes, then you need to do the work. And maybe something like that. I haven't quite put the dots together completely, but I would say maybe that's something along those lines, looking towards, okay, well, this is a situation that is to do with me. No one else is going to change this. And there must be a potential solution out there. So I was fortunate enough to have access to the internet, be able to go and search for that. And then and I found that this is tends to be the theme in my life thereafter as well, is that when I have a clear path of doing something, I'm able to actually execute. I'm maybe not the person who puts together the most articulate plan in the world, but once I see a clear formula, I love to take action. I love like actionable things that I can do and take advantage of. When I see a blueprint, I'm like, perfect. I am going to follow that blueprint to a T and get the results, hopefully, that I want. And I think I was lucky enough to find that blueprint, and I was able to just follow it to the best of my ability. And I say this to my clients all the time, is that once you start seeing results, it starts to become very, very exciting and very incentivizing. And maybe I was also young enough to not experience kind of the backlash of failure. I didn't really have much responsibility at that stage in my life. So, I wasn't, and I also wasn't hanging too much on this. I think maybe when you get to the point where you're in your 20s and your 30s, you know what weight loss is and you know what type of results other people have had. I had no idea of what results I could get. So every single 1% in the right direction was a massive win for me. Maybe if I started my very first journey at the age of 30 or 20 or whatever that might have been, it might not have been so exciting. But because it was a small amount of progress and steps in the right direction, I became hungrier and hungrier for it. So, the difference between me and any other kid, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I would just say that if anyone is feeling like that, search towards the solution, recognize that's within you, and you're going to be the only one to make that change, and then do whatever you can to take action.
Do you have any thoughts on the topic of willpower?
Willpower, I would say I've got plenty of different thoughts, maybe not in relation to my story as a child, but I think that when it comes to willpower, I don't necessarily think it's one of these things that's finite. I know that that's a debate that goes on of whether we have willpower towards the end of the day. I definitely think decisions are maybe harder to make towards the back end of the day. But at the same time, I think that it's less about do you need willpower and more about how do I not even need to bring willpower into the situation here. And I find that maybe if it's something that you're trying to build in your life that's not super, super simple, such as health and fitness, which tends to be a challenge for many people, it will be like, well, how can I make this as frictionless as possible to the point that I don't even need to bring willpower into the equation? So, if you're realistically got everything prepared, so let's say it's an evening meal, for example, if that's prepared and that's in place, it's in your fridge, it's relatively delicious, it takes a few minutes to prepare or a few minutes to heat up, then there's almost more reasons as to why eating out or getting something from delivery or whatever it might be is actually more frictionful than eating the food that you're actually eating. So for me, it's less about contemplating willpower, but also almost about making the things that you want to do so easy and the things that you don't want to do harder, so that the obvious choice becomes the one that you do want to end up doing. So I think that it's less about, is willpower infinite or finite or whatever it might be, and more about how can I make this as frictionless as possible so that the thing that I want to do is always going to be the thing that ends up being easiest, quote unquote, or at least less frictionful than the other thing that I genuinely don't want to do, or that doesn't take me down the path that I genuinely want to go.
I think that's a good answer, and I think it applies to the reason why I asked it, which was if there is someone who wants to change but finds it difficult. I think mainly with food. I think people struggle with
Mm.
food more than they do the topic of exercise. And actually, I have found that people who exercise still, because of nutrition, still are overweight, and it's just much more difficult for them to get rid of it due to the diet. So, in terms of what you would do if you had someone asking for advice in relation to diet or habits, what would you say to them?
I think you're absolutely right in saying that people do have a tougher time with nutrition due to probably the emotional link, I would say more so than anything. I think that the exercise side of things, there can be some resistance there. And maybe there is some specific insecurities around doing exercise because they maybe weren't that good at sport as a child, or the intimidation of going into the gym, etc. But I think nutrition, as you mentioned, tends to be the big one. And I think it's really about maybe giving it the respect it deserves in the sense of saying, okay, when it comes to my nutrition, it isn't ever, and this is something I tell people all the time, it's not because you're a foodie. It's not because you just love food, and everyone loves food. And I think that the more you go through life, the more you realize that as well. I love food. I'm sure you love food, Thomas. Yet we probably can navigate our nutrition in a way that aligns to our goals when we need to. So I think that the real thing is as well, let's not just put I'm a foodie on top of this, but truly find the reason why we're struggling. Okay. If it is a nutritional challenge that we're going through, but it's only every Friday or Saturday night, well, why is it happening every Friday or Saturday night? Maybe we can start to think about, okay, well, is it off the back of a super stressful week? And, the only way in which you can kind of self-soothe in a sense and relieve that stress is through food, because that's what you've always done, I should say, then that might lead to some insights. And sometimes maybe we don't want to go that deep. I think a lot of people start a health and fitness journey thinking it's going to be a case of getting an exercise regime in place, getting a nutrition plan in place, and then everything's going to be fine off the back of that. Later to realize that actually there's a lot of things way deeper than that. There's a lot of, emotional trauma that might have led you to eating in that fashion. There might be a lot of feelings that are associated with that certain food that you go for. So many people will know the term comfort eating, but we put it as such a kind of normal thing. But then we have to ask ourselves, well, why are we comfort eating? Where did that even begin? And then, if we dig deeper, most people's celebrations, they came with food as well. So, when delicious food came into the houses because either they were celebrating or maybe that they were mourning or something along those lines, because it came in the house when there was a funeral, or if something bad happened to you, you'd be cheered up with food. We have so many different emotional links to food. I think maybe we brush over those too much and we just put it down to I'm a foodie, or I don't have willpower, or something along those lines, whereas sometimes it's much deeper. And I think just stopping to reflect and asking yourself, okay, well, what is the genuine issue here? Like, am I good at going to get a normal breakfast in the morning? Like a breakfast that's well balanced, has a little bit of protein, isn't crazy high in calories? Yes, that's perfect. Okay. But when do I start to slip up? Okay, it's that mid-afternoon dip. Maybe that's linked to boredom, and maybe I've soothed boredom with eating all of my life. And I think that I'm going down a lot of different routes of why people might be having these challenges, but quite often they're linked to something deeper. So if you stop and reflect and ask yourself the question, you really go back as well to trying to establish where that first came from, it gives you a lot of answers. And I feel like that self-awareness piece and that knowing where it comes from is the first step to actually doing something about it. Because for you, it might be like, I just need willpower. But maybe you told yourself a story all your life that you can't have willpower when it comes to food. And then you kind of defeated yourself, already from the start. It might not have anything to do with willpower. It might just be that, like we mentioned earlier, the only way that you can soothe your emotions right now is through food. So maybe you need a more productive way of navigating your emotions or the stresses in your life, the things that you're ignoring. And then all of a sudden, that becomes a lot easier to deal with than it did in the first place.
I've seen some stuff on the obesity epidemic. I think it's something, at least in the UK anyway, I think it's something along the lines of 2 out of 3. I don't know how accurate that is, but are you optimistic about the future in relation to this topic?
It's funny. I actually ask this question to a lot of my guests when I have people specifically in the weight loss and fitness field as well, because of when you're in this bubble, all you have are people coming to you to improve their lives and to get in shape. Like, I'm a coach and I have people telling me they want to commit to this. They tell me the stories about how they influence their partner. Now their family is eating well. I have a podcast when I speak to healthy people in it all the time who are encouraging more people to be healthy as well. But then you look at the stats and they don't seem to be going in a direction whatsoever. And what I'm doing and what many other coaches are doing are really just a drop in the water. So a drop in the ocean, I should say. And realistically, am I optimistic? I'm optimistic about the information that's available and the accessibility that people have to health and fitness, because of, if anything, as with everything that we live, it's like it's harder and easier than ever to do anything that you want to. So maybe we're like, okay, well, we have all the information in the world that we could possibly need to get someone in shape. Yet now we have maybe too much information that people are getting overwhelmed by the sheer things that they can and can't do, and then they end up making those decisions whatsoever. So I am optimistic because we are becoming more aware of things. We have more information, we have more technology, we have many different forms of even online coaching, right? Like the thing that I do on a day-to-day basis. 10 years ago, I mean, I tried to set up an online coaching business maybe 8 years ago. I simply failed because of the lack of awareness around it, right? The only people who were doing that at that stage were maybe bodybuilders or people who were really invested into the fitness world. Now, every second person might know about online coaching. It's kind of a household term compared to what it used to be. And I still say it has a way to go. So to bring a short answer to the long one I was giving you, I would say I'm optimistic about the accessibility and the availability of the information, but I'm not so optimistic about the changes that are being made because the data are showing us that we are heading in a direction that doesn't seem to be getting better. And it's kind of different compared to mental health. We find that mental health seems to be on the rise in terms of the statistics of people saying they are experiencing mental health challenges, who are going through depression and anxiety and all these other things. But at the same time, that's just mainly, we'll see what direction it goes in. But it's mainly because people have a voice and they're able to speak about it now. So naturally, the more people to speak about it, the higher the stats are going to be of the people who have it. Whereas nothing's really changed from a physical health and fitness perspective yet. The data seems to be suggesting that it's not actually getting any better, and we are getting more and more obese because of just as the accessibility is increasing, so is the ease of life in the sense of things being delivered to our door, unhealthy quote unquote foods being super accessible compared to what they were 10, 15 years ago. So long story short, not super optimistic, but I do think that there is an opportunity for change. It's just where we lean towards as a society over the course of the next, coming decades, I guess.
Well, I think you're doing good work anyway. So, as long
Thank
as you
you.
can hold your head up high, right? That's the main thing.
Are you optimistic about the health and fitness of the society moving forward?
I think it is an educational problem.
Okay, that's
So,
interesting.
I think when people walk into the supermarket, the majority of the products available to them, have the ability to make them fat, and they don't know. And I think if they did know, I think they'd make different decisions.
How much do you think that they would make different decisions though? Because I think if I go up to someone in the street and ask them give me three healthy foods and three unhealthy foods, people are more than aware. Maybe they don't know exactly how to formulate the well-balanced nutrition plan that they need, but I feel like most people know what a healthy food is, quote unquote, and what an unhealthy food is, quote unquote.
The analogy I'd give you is smoking. So,
Mm,
they put a load of warnings on cigarettes,
I
pictures,
do.
made it completely transparent about what happens to you when you smoke, and the data on that is I'm not like a scientist or something, so I don't know for sure, but I think that
Yeah.
it's quite clear in the sense that as soon as they started doing those things, made it clear about what the implications of those actions are, it significantly dropped. So
Mm.
I think it's just hidden a lot. So you don't know your implications of your actions. You're going to do it and wonder why something's happening.
Yeah, and I guess it's not quite as black and white when it comes to nutrition either, because of, if you go to somewhere like Mexico, for example, and some of the other South American countries, they do have those labels, and they're not quite as graphic as the photos that you see on cigarette packets, but they say excess sugar, excess fat on anything that goes above their recommended daily allowance within the 100 gram or whatever the serving might be. And you go and look at your dark chocolate, your 70 or 80% dark chocolate, and it says excess sugars and excess fat. But the context there is that, well, actually, dark chocolate can be very well implemented in someone's nutrition. It's more about the portion size. So that's where it gets a little bit into the gray area, right? Because of it that requires more education. Whereas smoking, there isn't really any benefits to smoking. Like from a health standpoint, at least, maybe if you were born 40 years ago, it might look cool and your friends did it, but outside of that, it didn't actually have any benefits to you. Whereas dark chocolate can, but obviously, if you eat an entire 100, 200 gram bar of that, then you're going to be having problems pretty soon. So maybe that's the challenge as well. Like I said, extra information and education needs to be there because it's not so black and white as smoking is slash yeah was.
I also think I've discounted one side of things, which is the exercise element that actually improves mental health. So you mentioned the fact
Yep.
that mental health is an issue at the moment. I think a lot of people associate mental health with, I just want a beach bod type thing, when
Hmm.
in actual fact it can be something which maintains, you can go from being a depressed or anxious person to implementing exercise in your life and you're essentially well again. And I think people don't have that association.
No, that's very true. And I think that hopefully the pandemic kind of brought that to people's awareness a little bit more because they were maybe indoors for such a long period of time. And they noticed that maybe their anxiety and depression ended up getting a little bit more prominent. And then they went outdoors again and then they recognized the difference, right? And I think that that probably woke people up. And also, they started going out on walks more because they were only allowed to leave the house once a day. A lot of people, especially my clients, recognize that, being out in the green, taking 30 minutes to themselves, not having to do the commute on the tube, so actually having an hour in the morning to go do that work was super beneficial for them. But like you said, I think there's a long way to go to recognizing how important that is and how it can be so minimal as well. Because I don't think it's, the gym session or, the really, really proactive exercise class that helps people. It's literally usually, but of course, those things help people, but the bare minimum of just going for a 30-minute walk out in nature is probably the biggest key to success when it comes to people's mental well-being. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on there. And I think that, just as we're made aware about many other things that are kind of irrelevant to us, and you see things like bananas are toxic or you need to throw all of your bread away, like the links between mental health and exercise would be really powerful as a message to just kind of scream off the rooftops.
Well, before we move on from your story, the question is, if you could tell that 14-year-old boy something who's concerned and worried about his body, what would you say to him?
I would tell him to do exactly what he was doing. He definitely had the insights that I'm not sure how he was able to gather them, but I give him credit for gathering them. And he was doing the right thing in terms of heading in direction of saying, like, this is my responsibility. And didn't do it in like an unhealthy way either, which is the kind of impressive part. Again, like I see no reflection between who I am today and that boy, funnily enough. But like, yeah, I really acknowledge him for not doing it in an unhealthy way. It could have been easy to just say, okay, you need to run for 3 hours every single day, or you need to go down the route of like not eating anything at all. But in some way, shape, or form, I was able to say, okay, well, let's look for the way in which seems quite productive and healthy and able to do it. So I'll definitely tell him to continue doing that, but then I'd probably tell him that there's no rush. Like, be patient with it because of I think that there is obviously this temptation to do things as quick as possible and to try and get to the place that I want to be as fast as I possibly can. But I think that there is a very, very beautiful message in patience. If you're doing the right thing, you don't need to worry about if you're going to get there realistically. You just need to keep doing that, be patient, recognize what you're doing is paying off, and just continue to do the things that get you the results and not stress or worry about whether you're going to get there. Just allow it to be. And yeah, I would definitely say that. And then obviously later down the line, it would just be a case of continue to do more of that. Recognize that that's going to be the case in most areas of your life. If you have a challenge that you're going through, recognize that the solution lies within you and get some information, take action, and hopefully you don't need to course correct, but if you need to, course correct along the way.
I like that message. And the patience element is, I think, particularly poignant when you see things like celebrity 6-month body transformation or something. And
Mm-hmm.
how I think you referenced this in your profile, I believe, about the fact that it takes a long time to go from it's like the before and after picture. It does take a while. So have you got any thoughts around the topic of those celebrity body transformations that are not very not very likely if you're doing it in a natural way?
Yeah, I think that it's easy to get tempted by the celebrity transformations and these really impressive and sensationalized timelines of like, and that's the thing. This is what I was reading at the time. On the front, it was mainly like men's fitness magazines when I was first discovering this information. A few websites here and there. Social media really wasn't a thing that much. I don't know when it was, but it was a solid 15 years ago. So social media really didn't have the same level of information that it has today. So it was all 6 weeks to abs and all this type of stuff. And trust me, I felt like those things. A lot of my first workouts were probably things that I grabbed from there. And I was definitely engaged and invested in the same way that anyone would be today. But I think that sometimes you don't want to defeat yourself, but almost if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And I think that it's mainly not about leaning towards the celebrity, or even in my case, maybe like the professional athlete, because their lifestyles are going to look very, very different to yours. And the accessibility to plastic surgery, chefs in their houses, a personal trainer who spends the majority of their day with them is very different to your lifestyle when, maybe, as a kid, I was only at school, so it wasn't too much of a big deal. I could invest as much time as I wanted to. But if you're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, you've got a job, you've got kids, you've got responsibilities. So, not probably going to be able to achieve the same results. So I think, again, that patience piece is not the sexiest work in the world. It really isn't. But it's really worth recognizing that these things, especially when things that you want to stick over a long period of time, they do take time. And I like to think of the health and fitness transition as not just getting to your result, but kind of keeping your result. And for me, that requires like a shift in lifestyle, to be completely honest. The thing with your health and fitness is it's not really owned, it's only kind of rented. And you have to pay that rent in the form of eating good foods, training on a regular basis, or exercising on a regular basis, looking after your sleep and your hydration. Because if you don't kind of pay the bills from that perspective, it starts to catch up with you again. And obviously, if you put in a lot of investment in the early stages, kind of like I did, I got obsessed with it, which was great for my career and great for the time of my life. I'm a little bit more well balanced now comparatively, but that helps me out now. I can be a little bit more relaxed because I had all those years where I was very, very obsessive. I was doing 5 or 6 sessions per week, but most people wouldn't have gone through that. So it's a case of just recognizing that, okay, you're making a big transition to your lifestyle here, and you might get your result in a short period of time. But if you want to maintain those results for a long period of time, which I think all of us truly do want to, then it's going to take some time. And the headline story is probably not going to be the thing that ultimately allows you to maintain that result. It might help you get to that result. But again, they're trying to sell you something here. They're trying to sell you a story. They're trying to sell you a product or something along those lines. And usually the best intentions aren't hidden within. So I would try and gather as much information as you can. And, also speak to someone who doesn't have any benefit from your journey going any faster than it actually needs to go. And then usually you're going to find a more realistic time frame and approach that works for you, especially if you've gone through many times before where you've tried and failed these things. Like, it's nothing to do with you. It's probably everything to do with the approach. Of course, take a little bit of responsibility, but if you find that you're going for these really short-term quick fixes all the time and nothing seems to be sticking, or you end up back at square one, 1 year later, there's probably an indication that that's not the right thing for you to be doing on a long-term basis.
Well, the try and fail, that feedback where you've actually tried something, you've tried to make a change and just haven't been able to continue it, I think is very common. What advice would you give to that person who, let's say, I've tried to do exercise, I've tried to start running, I've tried to start eating healthy, but I haven't been able to continue with it. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I'm going to contradict myself here. And I just said that obviously, if you go and see that the approach isn't working time and time again, it could be the approaches that you're choosing, but also the lowest common denominator is always going to be you. And it might have been the approach, but you're still the one picking that approach every single time. So there has to be a little bit of self-awareness there to be like, okay, well, I tried these 6-week plans and they don't seem to be sticking for me. Then maybe that's not the approach that works for you. And something that I find with a lot of people as well is that they maybe want audacious results, but they're not willing to give anything in the way of audacious efforts. And then you've got to kind of have that self-reflection as well and say, okay, well, am I truly giving enough in order to get the results that I want? Because of many times, and I get this a lot with the clients that I work with, usually someone will come to me off the back of seeing their friend or a family member go through the process, getting amazing results. And like, I want results just like that. But they're not able to see beyond the surface. They see the result and they're like, well, if James or Julia did it, then I can do it. And the reality is that they didn't actually see all of the sessions that James and Julia did. They didn't see all the sacrifices that they made, the shift in their relationship with food, the sleep, the hydration, and all these things that just sort of result in this like, yeah, I want a bit of that. So I think that a lot of honesty has to come in place. And you got to ask yourself, well, if something hasn't been sticking, why hasn't it been sticking? And then there's always clues, there's always insights that you can gain. And I think as long as you stay kind of optimistic and maybe don't rely too much on any given approach, not like, okay, I just need to find the right plan and then it will work. Because of most plans, even if they're super unoptimal, will work if you've got the right level of mindset and commitment to the process, right? I tell people, like, if you just eat a little bit healthier and you decide to do Zumba twice a week, you're probably going to be a little bit healthier if you do that for long enough, right? So you can get quite far with an unoptimal approach, but you've just got to be willing to stick at it and just be able to find what is working for you. And if you're finding you're getting tripped up by certain things, have that self-awareness to step back and be like, okay, well, why isn't this working? And always try and shine the light on you as well, like shining the light on the approach and putting the control out of your hands is probably not going to serve you, as 14-year-old or 13-year-old Elliot did. Like, put it back into your hands and be like, what can I do about this? Because the approach isn't going to change. It's always going to exist, and it's going to be the thing that exists. So what can you do with the abilities that you have? If you're not sticking to the nutrition plan, what can you do about that? If you're not sticking to your training plan, what can you do about that? And there's a certain element of saying, okay, well, maybe something is super unrealistic for my lifestyle, but then you can't just be like, well, that's unrealistic for my lifestyle, I'm just going to leave it there. You have to ask, well, what is realistic to my lifestyle? And the unfortunate thing is that you might only be able to do 2 sessions per week, and you might have to get slightly slower results than James and Julia did. And you might have to accept that. You might have to work a little bit harder. I get this a lot when people are like, well, I've got, a thyroid issue or something along those lines, or, all of my family have been overweight. And as much as that is very, very real, it's kind of the question of, well, now what? And it's like, well, maybe you will have to work a little harder than the person down the road. And that kind of sucks for you. But do you still want your result? Yes. Well, then you're going to have to put a little bit more effort in. It was kind of like 14-year-old Elliot. Like, he didn't want to start slightly chubby and overweight, but at the same time, you can use your adversity to your advantage by saying, well, actually, if I wasn't that chubby little child, maybe I wouldn't have been that motivated to get off my butt and do something about it. And we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So it's kind of like shining a light and saying, well, you know what, it might be harder for me in this sense, but I'm going to use that to my advantage. I'm going to get even more clued up about what I need to do with my nutrition to have the most success on this journey. Then we're going to give that a little bit more to the training side of things, because I want the best possible results I can get. And in a way, you start to thank the fact that you do have that adversity, because it requires you to step up. And then when you put extra effort in, you kind of got that, I guess it's going to be the opposite of the sunk cost fallacy, when you've invested a lot, but you actually see the results from it. So you stay invested. And that was kind of the same with me. It's like, well, I put in a lot of effort to get myself in shape here, so I'm not going to let this go. Whereas if results come easy, they kind of go easy. Whereas if results come off the back of a lot of hard work, there's more intention, there's more incentive, I should say, for people to hold on to those as well. So I think it's all about seeing your adversity as maybe an advantage. It's not going to be easy initially, but eventually when you do get the result, you'll thank yourself for that adversity.
I like that about seeing your adversity as your advantage. That's good. I haven't heard it phrased like
Mm.
that. It does make me wonder about perhaps your favorite stories of people you helped. So has anything come to mind for you there?
Yeah, I'm going to try and give you a unique one, because I get this question quite a lot on podcasts. And I think the main one that always comes to mind is the ones where people go through these, phenomenal big weight losses where they lose 30, 40 kilos or something along those lines. And they are incredible feats, because I know what it's like to maybe lose 15 kilos. I can't imagine what losing double of that looks like. It's almost not possible to comprehend for myself, because it's very, very impressive the way that people can turn their lives around from that perspective as well. But one story that comes to my mind is a mum of 4, and she has just had her 4th child. And she decides that, okay, I know that I'm pretty much done with having children here. A 5th one isn't on the way, 4 is more than enough. And what she does is she decides to take action on her health and fitness immediately. And the particular part that I find impressive, we've got a few mothers on my roster as well. Another one comes to mind. We've worked together at all different stages. We worked with her when she had no kids, when she had one kid, and now she has two children as well. So she's another impressive one that comes to my mind. But the specific story I want to tell here is about the mothers who get themselves back on track with their health and fitness just after having their last child, essentially. And the impressive part about this to me is I meet mothers all the time who have waited 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20, maybe even 30 years before they start to prioritize themselves again. And this mother in particular, it would have been easy for her to say, I've had 4 children. I'm just going to allow my body to have a little bit of a break. And I'm going to pick this up maybe when they grow up a little bit. I'm not looking after a 6-month-old and I haven't got an 8-year-old, 4-year-old, and 2-year-old running around the house. But she decides to invest in her health and fitness. And 1 year on, she is a completely different person in the way of her health and well-being. She's dropped, I can't remember the exact amount, but somewhere between 15 and 20 kilos, which is super damn impressive. But the most impressive part of this story is that she didn't wait until she kind of gave herself permission to do it. She recognized that, okay, this is a priority. And I know that my lifestyle, in a sense, is leaning against me right now. I'm going to be kind of sleep deprived. I'm only just coming off the back of pregnancy. My doctor has given me the all clear to start exercising as well. But no one would say anything if I decided to just park my health and fitness for a little while, especially after having 4 kids in such a quick succession. But she did it anyway. And she went at it with 100% of herself, everything that she could give. She went through those normal situations that people go through in terms of family is eating and they're enjoying the different meals that they're having. Dad's not really on point at this point. Dad has gone through a journey before, but right now he's not super focused on his journey. So him and my 9-year-old son are eating hot dogs and it's cold and I'm tempted by it. And she's going all through that. And she's just had her 4th child, yet she is committed to her training. She's committed to her nutrition. And 1 year down the line, again, not a fast story whatsoever. She didn't drop an incredible amount, but she gets to the result that she wants to be. And we go through a period of maintenance. And to this day, and this was a while ago, this was back in 2021 or 2020 or something along those lines. And to this day, she's still maintaining somewhere close to that result. And I just think about it all the time because she could be someone who comes up to me tomorrow who waited 3 or 4 years, but she's been living with those results for 3 years because she made that decision not to wait and to start prioritizing herself. And I find that particularly impressive about mothers because they are very selfless. They're probably the most selfless people in the world in a sense. And I know that she probably would have been tempted to just be like, okay, I just need to give my all to my children. But she recognized that she didn't have to choose. She could be selfless and selfish at the same time. And I don't think selfish is a bad thing in this sense. It was just a sense of saying, I do need to prioritize myself. And if anything, I'm going to be a better mom off the back of this as well, because I'm going to prioritize me, and a healthier version of me is the better mom. And it's going to be a better mom right now and also in 10, 20, 30, 40 years when my children are much older as well. So that's a particularly impressive one to me. Any moms who make the decision to start prioritizing themselves again, especially so soon after having children, even if they have the intention of having more or not, for me are always impressive stories. And that's one that really always comes to my mind. I don't think that's a story I've told on a podcast before. So that's the first time I'm sharing that one.
Well, thank you for sharing it. You bring up a good point to ask about, though, which is you're on the path of health and fitness, and then all of a sudden a scenario comes up where you potentially cheat, or as another way of asking about, do you do junk food?
Personally, I was much less in that world before. I got myself to a stage where I enjoyed my normal day-to-day foods just as much as I enjoyed quote unquote junk foods. And I also find that whatever our external environment has the opportunity to influence us, but so does our internal one, right? So if you're not consuming a lot of junk food, it's not really the thing that your body is going to be asking for on a regular basis. So I was locked into the health and fitness world for a very, very long time, which really helped me with not really needing that anymore. And anytime I did have that, and a lot of people have this experience when they start cleaning up their nutrition, all of a sudden they'll have a pizza and they're like, wow, I'm super bloated. I really I enjoyed the taste for the first couple of slices, but I feel the effects of this for the next 2 or 3 days, and my digestion doesn't sort itself out for almost a week. And then it gets to a point of weighing up the pros and cons. And for me, I didn't really invest in it that much whatsoever. I might have had a pastry once a week. That might have been as far as it went. And I enjoyed that because I genuinely enjoyed the foods that I was creating. And my quote unquote junk food meant whatever I kind of wanted, I would make it homemade, and I would make heavier quantities of it. And that was enough to kind of tick those boxes for me. So that's what I ended up doing. But then actually, when I met my fiance, she was slightly different. She was still kind of in this world where she would be very, very on point throughout the week, and then she would eat whatever she wanted over the weekend. So right now we're finding a balance between those two things. And if anything, it has surprised me because I've consumed maybe a lot more than I would have definitely did in the past, that's for sure. And I've come into this space where I'm seeing that realistically, if you're able to balance it out with you being on point 90% of the time, and also when you do eat, you don't go crazy as well. It's not, I don't love the word cheat day or cheat meal or anything like that. I think it has a bit of a negative connotation to it. But if you are able to be on point like 90, 85% of the time, you would be amazed at how much your body can be resilient to those things. And then it's just a case of just making sure that you're not kind of itching for that Saturday night treat that you're applying for. I think that, again, there is the kind of temptation to go into a bit of an unhealthy pattern and relationship with food, but it is possible. Like, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think that the Elliot of the past was a little bit more focused on everything health and fitness. Let me just keep this on point as much as possible. And I was very happy to go through that phase of my life. And now I'm going into this different, or have been in this different phase where I'm kind of embracing having dates with my fiance now, my girlfriend at the time. And she loves to eat to her heart's content. So it's kind of about finding the balance between those two. And also, I think there will be a phase where maybe as I progress and I get a little bit older, I might want to reduce those type of things a little bit more. But yeah, once again, I'm giving you a short answer to a long preface. I think that you can have those in your world. The only challenge and the thing you've got to recognize about someone like myself is that the pendulum was swung in the other direction for a very, very long time. So when I swung it back, it kind of came back to a bit of a baseline because I'd been on this side for so long. A lot of us are on the junk food side for 20, 30, 40 years. And you actually do need to probably spend a little bit of time on the other side while being a little bit more on point, a little bit healthier so that you can find your baseline. Because if you go from junk food all the time to a little bit, it's like, yeah, you might get away with it, but you're not really in that balanced zone. I'm always encouraging people to say, okay, well, you've been here for a lot of time. Have some time on the other side of things, and then come back to whichever baseline suits you best. Because of also, that's the big thing of when someone gets started on a journey, I usually try to have them be alcohol free for the early stages as well. Not because of alcohol is, anything poisonous or terrible or whatever it might be. It's more a sense of like, okay, now we can get an understanding of what our relationship is like with alcohol. And not only that, we can also see, okay, well, how do we feel without it? Because we might have not been without it since we were like 17 years old. And there's the same with food as well. It's like, well, how does it feel on the other side of that pendulum? And then when you come back, you can have a little bit more of an intentional relationship with alcohol, with food, which I think everyone could benefit from because of your internal environment is going to send you all these cues of what it's used to. So if it's used to, junk food and alcohol since you were 16 years old, it's only going to keep asking for that. But if you give it the opportunity to kind of not detox, but not have it for a little while, and you start consuming some healthier foods, you find a little bit more of a balanced approach that tends to work on a long-term basis with having health and fitness goals and then also enjoying the things that you want to in life as well.
I think it's particularly true what you said about the fact that after a while, you actually go to not wanting those foods anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I've found that to be true, definitely. And yeah, just worth highlighting. Regarding the alcohol stuff, Andrew Huberman does a really good episode on the science around what alcohol does to your body. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a recommendation from me. Is there anything I should have asked you about today, Elliot?
There isn't anything that you should have asked because it's your podcast, and I always want you to have the freedom to ask whatever you want, whatever on your own minds. If we are on that health and fitness topic, the only thing that maybe we haven't discussed is people maintain their results on a long-term basis, and also the approach that I think I want people coming into any journey with. And it kind of comes back to avoiding those quick fixes, but also recognizing that those people who end up maintaining their results on a long-term basis, because I felt a bit of a switch after the pandemic. Before the pandemic, everyone was very much in the sense of like, get me results, get me, the beach body, whatever that might be. Post pandemic, I think it made everyone a little bit more intentional about their health. So like, I no longer want that. Well, I want the results, but I don't need the quick fix anymore. I want to lean towards something that's going to keep my health in place because of maybe I lost someone during the pandemic. Maybe it just gave me an indication of how important my health was. And I do find that that's switch and that, that phase towards more long-term results is happening. But the thing that comes to my mind is that, those people who do end up having those long-term results, they don't fall into the trap of being super all or nothing. They find themselves, somewhere in between. They find that, if they do have a few days where they fall off track with their nutrition, they don't give themselves too much of a hard time. They kind of brush themselves off and get back on it again. If they have a couple of weeks where they're not able to complete their training, they're able to once again not give themselves a hard time or feel guilty. They just say, okay, well, I'm going to put more effort into the coming weeks as well. So I think the big thing I wanted to mention is like always opting for something that's more of a lifestyle and long-term approach and not being so volatile with if you stay on track or if you don't stay on track tends to be a really, really healthy way of keeping yourself in a good position and making sure that these results stick and they don't end up just being these short-lived things because of, I think, someone said it recently about money, and I think of it in the same sense of health. He said that it's worse to have had money and then to have lost it and remember what the feeling of being rich and having money was versus like never having money at all. And it's the same with your health and fitness as well. Like, I don't want people to remember what it was like to feel amazing and to have abs and everything along those lines, and then to have lost it and then just be craving that life again of where they were. I would prefer people to be at the very, very beginning thinking, okay, well, I want these abs or I want this money, whatever, but I don't want to go back. I want to think about what's going to allow me not only to get this in the short term, but what allows me to live this lifestyle for the remaining decades of my life. Maybe it's not going to be the sharp abs that you had when you were in your late 20s, but it's going to be having a good quality of health, being quote unquote in shape, whatever that looks like for your different phase of life, and generally just holding a good amount of health and well-being.
Reminds me of the term sustained change, because
Yes.
if you're only doing it for 6 months or whatever for a particular reason, then it's only going to last for a certain period of time. Whereas if you make sustained change, then it's going to last forever, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a great mindset to go into this type of journey specifically with, because, with the health and fitness journey, short-term results are literally that. They're just short-term. You've got to go in with a long-term mindset because of you're not only doing this for a particular phase of your life. Ultimately, you want to be healthy for the entirety of your life. And if you're going to live up to, I can't remember what the average age expectancy is, but I think it's like 78 or 83 or something along those lines. It's like got a lot of life to live, which means you've got a lot of life to keep your health on point. So short-term practices are not going to hold you all the way for those next decades of your life.
And if people want to hire you or connect with you, where do they go?
The best place to find me would be my Instagram page, first and foremost. That's at Elliot Hasoon. They can listen to the podcast as well, which is the Simply Fit podcast. And you can pretty much find everything about working for me off the back of that as well. But yeah, I really appreciate you having me today, Thomas. I truly do. And it's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Well, thank you. I think you've been a great guest. Do you have any closing thoughts for us today?
No, I just want to encourage everyone to not allow this to go in one ear and go out the other, and it just be a bit of a short-term motivation, but really try and hang on to the things that resonate with them and try and implement them and take action off the back of them. That'll be the best thing I can get out of this podcast today.
Elliot, thank you for being a great guest.
Thank you for having me.